an evolutionary scheme of manifestation of the potentialities latent but inherent in the all, or unmanifest, yet ultimate reality. We are said to participate in manifestedness by proxy, as it were, from our eternal home in the unmanifest by appearing to see through the mind into incarnate life, witnessing its limitations via identification with our various bodies or vehicles of consciousness, until we shrug off this identification or avidya and are set free by self-discovery subjectively of truth and the one self. This scheme of manifestation is very abstruse in its makeup and difficult to describe. Most of you remember the old movie, Around the World in 80 Days. Well, today's program will be somewhat along these lines. The description of the manifestation of the solar system, its spiritual beings, and humanity in 1 hour. Our presenter today is well versed in the requisite disciplines to attempt such a description. He holds a master's degree in organic chemistry from the University of Texas at Austin, and a Ph.D. in physical chemistry from the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville. The quantum mechanics of chemical reactions being his area of professional expertise. He recently spent a year here at Emory University doing theoretical research on the reaction aspects of explosives and propellants, and also taught science in the Waldorf system in Atlanta. He began his esoteric studies at 16, and his main areas of interest have been spiritual development, surprise, surprise, alchemy, the Kabbalah, magic, anthroposophy, esoteric Christianity, and cosmology. He has been a member of our lodge for several years, and although straining against being confined by labels, believe the most appropriate one might be Rosicrucian. Please welcome to talk to us today on how it all began, Dr. James Boughton.
As he said, attempt is the key word. I may have bitten off more than I can chew. We'll get as far as we can with this. I would like to apologize ahead of time for any mistakes I make. If I knew what they were, I wouldn't make them. I'm not clairvoyant. I am depending on testimony in the vast literature of occult science to put together what I'm going to tell you today, so I may have slipped up in a few places, and I apologize for that ahead of time. Okay, what I want to do is start off with some building blocks, so we'll have a vocabulary of concepts to talk about how what is came to be. So we have to look at what is first in a broad way. So let's start off with what can be called the spectrum of existence. Just as in the physical world, we have a physical body that is put together from the physical environment, there are three worlds that we're kind of connected up with, from which we put together our constitution: a physical world, a soul world, and a spirit world, and they can each be subdivided approximately in a sevenfold manner. There's kind of something that I call a reflected four, a reflected 4 in 7 paradigm. I won't go into that too much. I would like to talk just a little bit about this physical. So the word physical is often used very loosely, and it includes what's called the etheric sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't. So you have to be very particular about your meaning. There are 7 ethers, and there's some confusion about that as well. But they govern, in one way or another, the 4 states that the alchemists refer to as earth, water, air, and fire. We have solids, liquids, and gases. And I put the alchemical symbols here to represent these, you see that I have Earth here and here. This is the reflected paradigm I'm talking about. This is actually the densest ether. This is the least dense ether. This can be called the elementary world. And I put circles around these three at the bottom to represent the gross material states that they're clothed with. Solids, liquids, and gases. You may notice I have a dotted circle around the warm ether or fire. It's actually split in two. There's a sort of non-material warmth ether, and then there's a warmth ether that slips into what I can only call the material world, and its vibrations we can sense as heat. And of course, below this, in the spectrum of existence, you have the abyss, and there's a reverse, inverse hierarchy below this one. Now, actually, above the spirit world, there are some higher worlds. There's the Buddhic plane and the threefold nirvanic plane, but we won't need to touch on that. Now, you may have heard of the so-called Akashic records. That's where I'm getting all of this stuff. They reside in the topmost part of the spirit world, which is referred to in the East as a Rupa Devachan, being formless spirit world, and then Rupa Devachan being the form spirit world. And you'll notice I have these circles repeating here. There's an analogy between our world that we can see and these higher worlds in the sevenfoldness. Now, there's a lot of confusion about the bodies, and there are a lot of different systems with a lot of different names, and you can get yourself tied up in knots. I'm going to try to unravel some of this for you. When a person is deceased, you can think of them as having 9 members, 3 for each world. Physical body, ether body, soul body, physical world, and then sentient soul, intellectual soul, and consciousness soul, the soul world. These are referred to in Hebrew as the neshama, the raush, and the nefesh. And then you have, in the higher part of the spirit world, we have these higher components. Now, the spirit self is actually composed of this region of the spirit world, and so is the eye or the kernel. This is an archetype which creates the intellectual soul down below. It's really there. Now, the light spirit and the spirit man actually come from higher worlds, but they are residing in these 2 top levels, and that's why I have them in parentheses. Now, when a person is alive, there's a matrix connecting the soul with the body and the spirit with the soul, and it works out this way. So you have a 7-fold constitution when you're incarnated. This is the standard, you'll see this in a lot of books, physical body, etheric body, astral body, ego or the I, your identity, manas, buddhi, natma. This is actually the same layout that you'll find in A.P. Sinnett's Esoteric Buddhism. Okay. Now, I do want to emphasize again that these are where the records of the past and intimations of the future reside, in these levels where a highly developed clairvoyant can view them as sort of an experience of virtual reality. It's like being in a movie that unfolds in front of you. In the lowest Akasha, one sees the thinking world, what people and beings have thought. In the next higher region, the emotional, psychic soul world, what people have felt. And in the highest region, you see actual deeds, events, expressions of will. So if one wants to actually see what actually really happened, one has to have the development to read the highest form of the Akasha. If you can only read the lowest forms, you're going to make mistakes. People don't always think correctly. That's just putting it crudely. Okay. Now, kingdoms. This is us. The way things are disposed right now, minerals do not have an etheric body. They have a gross, solid material body, but no etheric body, and that's why they're not living. Everything alive has an etheric body. Plants have a physical body and an etheric body. Animals have a physical body, etheric body, and astral body. Humans have a physical body, etheric body, astral body, and ego. That's what differentiates the kingdoms. And the animal's consciousness is on the astral plane. The plant's consciousness is on the Rupa-Devaconic plane, and the mineral's consciousness is on the Arupa-Devaconic plane. And as we shall see, these four kingdoms all started at the same time and have unfolded to give us what we have today. Okay, consciousness. The issue of consciousness. There are 7 states of consciousness that we can really point to as something we can understand. There's deep trance, and it's a fundamental issue here. The focus of consciousness is very dependent on spatial concentration. The reason that deep trance consciousness is so dull is that it's so spread out in space. And we have deep sleep, which is less spread out, and then dream consciousness, picture consciousness, and then waking consciousness, objective consciousness, as we see things out in the world as we do today. And then we have higher states, psychic or conscious, picture consciousness. You're conscious while looking at the pictures. Superpsychic, conscious sleep, spiritual or conscious universal. Now again, you have the reflected paradigm. This highest consciousness here is spread out about as far as the deep consciousness, the difference being you're conscious. Through a process of spiritual development, one can become conscious in these more and more spread out states. The higher a being is developed, the more spread out in space they become. Their consciousness expands to very large spatial dimensions. So we have a consciousness that is here. Animals have a consciousness that is here. Plants have a consciousness that is here. And minerals have a consciousness that is here. Okay. This out of the way. Leave it there for your reference. Okay. Now, what about other beings besides those mentioned? Here is the so-called hierarchy of beings. Now, some of you may notice that I have overlaid this on the Kabbalistic tree of life. It's a very old symbol that is quite profound. The key to it, the key to understanding the Kabbalah as it was originally understood by the Essenes, and not so much by the later Kabbalah, which has had a lot of stuff hung on it, is to understand that the Sephiroth represent the stages of consciousness by which the beings can be classified. We follow the so-called lightning flash up. Now these names are basically the ones that come down to us from Dionysius the Areopagite, who was taught by St. Paul in Athens, and who headed up a mystery school there to teach the students of Paul. This was passed down orally and was written down just before 600 AD. A lot was lost along the way, but a lot was retained. Now, above this highest order of beings, we have the Trinity. This is sometimes referred to as the three logi. First logos, second logos, third logos. In Christian terminology, they're called the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The first hierarchy, these three groups of being, are basically work for, to put it in a crude sense, the first logos. The second hierarchy works for the second logos, and the third hierarchy works for the third logos. Now, just to look at some of the responsibilities of these beings. Angels, one of the things they do is they're guardians for people, and they sort of handle the evolution of human beings on an individual basis. Archangels are concerned with folk, nations, groups of people. The archi are time spirits. They're concerned with the spirit of the times. The powers are spirits of form. They handle things like the form a planet has. The mites, or spirits of motion, are concerned with motion on and within a planet. The dominions are concerned with the consciousness of a planet. The thrones coordinate the movement of planets within a solar system. The cherubim give the solar system direction within the galaxy. And the seraphim maintain interrelationships between solar systems within the galaxy, and haphazard between galaxies as well. These beings, being higher in conscious development, are spread way, way, way out in space. You can understand that. The cherubim are actually the zodiac. The stars are there as signposts for us, but it's actually the cherubim that the forces come from. It would be nice if the other solar systems in the universe arranged themselves into 12 neat groups for our convenience, but they didn't do that. So the constellations are kind of not exactly placed in the 12 zones that one needs to think in terms of, considering astrology and other matters. Okay, now I'm going to get into periods of evolution in a bit. There are major periods of evolution, and with every period, whatever major period, or what are called planetary periods, you have a climbing of the ladder of this conscious development. So the angels in the previous period were down here, the archangels here, and so on. We will, in the next evolutionary planetary period, we will be here, and then one after that will be there, and then there. So the ladder is climbed toward the Godhead. And one can eventually be absorbed into the Godhead, the Father, become part of it, but of course that's where the ceiling is. There's nothing above that. Okay. Now, let's see, we should go through some of these alternate names. These are also the spirits of love, the spirits of harmony, the spirits of will. These are sometimes called the spirits of motion, or the virtues. These are sometimes the exousiae, the authorities, or the Elohim. In the Bible, these are the guys who are referred to as the Elohim. That's plural. And they work for this second logos. Third hierarchy, principalities. You may recall the phrase principalities and powers. We'll get into laggard spirits in a while. Every hierarchy has its backward spirits. Spirits of personality, they're also called. In the East, I hope I'm not mistaken, both of these hierarchies are referred to as the Jian Kohans. Okay, and of course, I've neglected the elementals, the gnomes, and so on, the beings of the four elements. Okay. Now, let's move to space. So let's... Okay. The solar system has a structure. just as we have a structure. The physical solar system I have with the orbits here in blue. These orbits, these concentric circles, represent the etheric body of the solar system centered in the sun. The etheric plane of the solar system is actually the body of the Elohim. That's why it's centered on the sun. And the planets in their orbits travel around like a marble embedded in a bubble on these etheric spheres. They're not perfect spheres, they're kind of squashed, egg-shaped spheres. But the hierarchical beings are arranged concentrically around the Earth, and that's the key to understanding the old Platonic system, because it was clairvoyantly observed. They were looking at the beings. They weren't concerned with the actual orbits of the planets. Of course, as the planet's distance changes from the Earth, you have a changing in the distribution of these spheres. These four elements in the etheric world are distributed into regions of concentrated activity according to the planetary sphere. Now, Saturn is the extent of the etheric body of our solar system. You'll see why that is when I get into the planetary periods. There are, of course, some planets physically beyond there, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but they are visitors to our evolutionary scheme. They will not come into play in a major way until the next periods of evolution. They do not contribute to the etheric plane of our solar system. They're just there watching. And I believe there are beings connected with them, but they're spectators right now. The cherubim, of course, extend beyond, far beyond, and are the zodiac, as I said. So we have the angels within the sphere of the moon, an important point. This is why I have the planets here in red to represent the spheres, which are the particular realms of activity of these beings. You have the angels centered on the earth in the astral plane. Okay, these black circles are the astral realms. They go up to the moon. The archangels go up to Mercury, and the archi go up to Venus, and the Elohim in their astral work on us go up to the sun, and then you have the spirits of motion, the dominions, and the thrones. Now, this is arranged in Chaldean order, so-called. You'll notice that it is the order of the lightning flash on the Tree of Life, and that's why it has that configuration. There's an issue that needs to be understood with regard to these two planets. In astronomy, the planet closest to the sun is called Mercury. You'll notice that I have these two planets switched. What happened was that in the time of the Caesars, there were forced initiations in the mystery schools. Every ruler wanted to be an initiate. And what some of the priests had to do to obviate some certain abuses of power is they changed the names of the planets so that the nature of the influences behind the planets wouldn't be recognized by the would-be initiates, because there are laggard beings with certain qualities tied up with these planets. So astrologers take note. You've got to switch the names of the planets. Okay. Now, we actually have a measure of time that is evolutionarily significant in the zodiac. The vernal point, we have something called the Platonic year. The vernal point moves clockwise, we're looking down from north, around the zodiac once every 25,920 years. And there are particular ages that occur on Earth for every one of these signs that point passes through. And every age has its mission, evolutionary mission for humanity that is sought to be accomplished. Okay. so the cherubim are the real lines of demarcation for that measure of time. So now let's look a little bit at an example of that near to our comprehension. We have what is referred to as the post-Atlantean age. It is a sevenfold age. There are 7 signs to which the vernal point moves. And it goes from 7227 BC to 7893 AD. You have the ancient Indian epoch, the Old Persian, the Egypto-Chaldean, the Greco-Latin, the 5th post-Atlantean, the 6th, and the 7th. And of course, the crucifixion here, under the sign of the ram, sacrifice. And of course, here we are now. Now, this date of 747 BC is fairly well fixed by clairvoyant observation. Each one of these periods lasts 160 years, so you can calculate forward and backward. But, of course, you don't want to get carried away and go too far. The farther away you get, the more you have to make allowances for things. And actually, as you get further and further away, you get into problems with the nature of time, what it really is, how do you measure it. And so I'm not totally wedded to numbers that are far, far away. Okay. Now, let's go a little further out. What we were just looking at is right here, post-Atlantean period, with its 7 ages. We have the Atlantean period here, and the Lemurian period here. Before that, we have 2, the Hyperborean and the Polarian. And this occurs in what is called the Earth planetary period, 4th round, 4th globe. So now, let's zoom out even more. I know this is starting to look complicated. Okay. Here's what we were looking at for the Atlantean period. And then there are these main ages, Polarian to the 7th. Okay, now, the rounds, you see there are 7 within 7. There are 7, 7, 7, 7, 7. Everything is in sevens. This accounting is base 7. Now, for every one of these globes, you see I have circles here. That's to remind you that these are globes, so-called, that we're talking about. There's a condition of form. The lowest point is the physical world, which we were looking at. And then there's the astral above it, the soul world, and then the 2 divisions of the spirit world above that. And so that's how you get the 7-foldness. Manifestation comes into being down from the higher realms through these 4 realms, and so you get the 7-fold manifestation. And of course, there is one of these in every round. I have 7 rounds here. Now, actually, between rounds, there's a kind of a sleep condition in the universe where everything disappears from view. It's gone up. It's gone back up into the higher realms, and nothing is to be seen. And there are actually 5 unseen rounds between each of these 7. So you get a 12-foldness that way, and this is referred to as a cosmic year. And There are 7 rounds in each planetary period, and there are 7 planetary periods.